Thank you for joining us. Our webinar will begin shortly. And if you are used to going to our webinars, you know what to do. But please, if you're new, feel free to enter into the chat where you're joining us from. We always love to learn where everyone is joining us from across the globe. Thank you, Kelly from Texas, for kicking us off. If you have any questions for our speaker today, we encourage you to ask those questions. However, as you can see, the chat moves very quickly. So instead of putting your questions in the chat, we ask that you put your questions in the Q&A section located at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to those questions once our presentation is complete. Again, welcome to today's webinar. Good day and hello everyone. Welcome back to our event called HRCI Insights. These are episodes that provide insights on current HR services, developments, and technologies. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, I have a couple of housekeeping items. This is an interactive session, so please use the chat to talk amongst yourselves, tell us where you're tuning in from, and also the chat is a great way for you to expand your professional network and to learn from each other. We kindly ask that you follow two rules though, please. One, limit your LinkedIn profile shares to 2 times, and also please ensure you keep all comments professional and respectful to our speakers and each other. Any bad actors will be ejected. And if you have any questions for today's speaker, please remember to use that Q&A section located at the bottom of your screen. Also, we want HRCI Insights to be accessible to everyone, so we have closed captioning running. If you do not need this resource, please click on Show Captions across the bottom of your screen, and then choose Caption Options to hide subtitles. If you are new to HRCI, we welcome you. If you're a returning attendee, we are so happy to see you again. We are honored that all of you have joined us today, and we always encourage you to please bring a friend next time, whether they are certified or not. My name is Megan Hayes. I'm the Director of Corporate Sponsorships here at HRCI. Today's topic is Ready to Transform Engagement Beyond Recognition. Here's where to start. It is my pleasure to introduce our friends at Bonusly who have returned for our HRCI Insights webinar series today. Our speaker, Debra Squyres, is Bonusly's Chief Customer Officer. Debra combines her passion for exceptional customer experience with her drive to empower companies to connect, motivate, and engage their employees to build winning workplaces. Prior to Bonusly, Debra was the VP of CS at Beamery and Chief Client Officer at Namely, to name a few. She has over 25 years of experience in senior leadership roles in human resources, ranging from in-house HR leadership to HR consulting, outsourcing, client services, and customer success, working directly with HR teams across a variety of industries. She currently resides in Fort Worth, Texas with her husband. It is my pleasure to toss it over to Debra, who will take it from here. Welcome. We're so glad you could join us again today.
Thanks so much, Megan. I'm so excited to be here. So I will give you 2 heads up on my approach in these conversations. One, I try to keep up with chat, but it is often very difficult, especially in HRCI when the chat is so engaging. That said, we've incorporated a couple of opportunities for, actually a handful of opportunities for you to provide input to us to keep this interactive or as interactive as possible. So just keep in mind that I'll be transitioning and looking at chat from time to time, and bear with me. Multitasking is not something I'm really great at, even though I try really hard. And the second thing is I'm adjusting to new glasses. So if I look like I've got kind of a grouchy spot in the center of my face where I'm like concentrating really hard, all I'll say is once you hit your 50s and you move into progressive lenses, the struggle is real, and hopefully I can see everything the way that I need to, but I just wanted to explain in case I didn't look happy at all times. So welcome to our conversation. I have the honor and the pleasure of talking with you about something that is super, it's very much a passion of mine, and it's really how to build high-performing, thriving workplaces and going beyond recognition to make that happen. So the goal is that today is super practical for you, and I hope that we share some tips that help you get started on your journey as well. So I'll just start by acknowledging it's a tough environment that we work in. Cultivating high-performing teams is harder than ever. As if the pandemic didn't throw us a curveball a few years ago in going from in office to remote and distributed overnight, there are a variety of factors that have led to this that really are not changing. So the reality is we have a new environment, a new workplace in which we need to develop better strategies to engage and really build high performing teams. So what happened? Since the pandemic, we've been hearing about people wanting more flexibility because we learned overnight that our old ways of working and our old expectations for the workplace didn't actually have to be the way that they were. We learned very quickly that flexibility was possible in all kinds of scenarios that people didn't even think were a consideration previously. And so right now, 95% of employees are really demanding some form of flexibility. Doesn't mean that they're not willing to go in office, but they want optionality in the way that they are working. And they want flexibility to work from home, to work remotely, to travel while they work. The demands are just higher on flexibility in the workplace. You add to that the dynamic changes happening in the workforce, really shocking. 27% of our workforce now are Gen Z, newly added to the workplace in the last few years. They also seek flexibility. So over a quarter of the workforce come from an expectation of flexibility. They crave transparency. They crave immediate feedback and open information. They really expect to have a partnership with their company or their employer, not just the traditional employer-employee relationship. And so they're placing new demands on the workforce and in the workplace, along with the realities that the dynamics of types of workers in the workplace are changing. With the addition of AI and a lot of automation, we are seeing the nature of roles shifting, the nature and responsibilities of employees changing. We're seeing 10,000 baby boomers a day retiring and exiting the traditional workforce, but maybe coming back in fractional roles. It's just become more complex to meet everyone's needs and to meet them where they are, to truly engage them. So cultivating high-performing teams is getting harder. We've seen a lack of trust emerge as an ongoing or recurring topic in the workplace. It's become more difficult to develop authentic relationships where people feel connected to the people that they're working with. You see significant increase in workload and shift in the type of work that people are doing. And we know that the impact of managers on employee engagement and satisfaction is truly profound. However, we also, at the same time, will acknowledge that we often promote people into management without the proper training and support, without the guardrails that help them to be successful and to develop those skills. We give them individual contributor responsibilities, and we essentially toss them in at the deep end to see if they can swim. So we're putting our managers in a really hard situation. And when your managers aren't effective, then the rest of your employees really struggle to be effective as well. And then finally, the shroud of remote and distributed work has actually required us to find more compelling ways to help employees to create relationships, to develop transparency in the work that's going on, to really understand and build relationships with the people across the organization, especially when you're going from one Zoom meeting to the next. You don't have those casual interactions or opportunities in the break room or at the water cooler, if we even have water coolers anymore, to catch up with people, to learn about them as humans and to learn about what they're doing, what they're working on as a company. It's just become more challenging. And all of these factors build up and have an impact on company outcomes altogether. It's just harder to align and motivate your workforce to deliver the outcomes that you're looking for in this setting. So our first opportunity for your feedback, and I know everybody's still welcoming each other in and sharing where they're coming in from, is a question for you all. Which of these trends are your biggest concerns? Is it a lack of trust in the workplace, general lack of trust, manager experience, complexity that has been introduced by remote or distributed work? Or is it something else? Is it all of the above? Yeah, lots of concerns. Real concern around lack of trust, burnout, I see, manager experience, lack of accountability. Wow. Strong feelings on this. So yeah, I think it's easy to acknowledge it is not the same workplace that we dealt with 5-10 years ago. And these challenges place tremendous responsibility on the shoulders, not just of HR, but on leaders across the business to help the company be most effective. So investment in people programs and tools are truly essential, but it's actually investment in the right tools. We're not lacking for tools among our workforce and in the workplace, but we may not be actually using the right tools to help our companies be successful, to help our teams be successful. I'll start with the manager role. Empowered managers contribute 48% higher profit to companies than average managers. And they have much more influence on the engagement and alignment of their teams. So they have a cascading effect on company impact and outcomes. New tools are another area of concern. And I'll show some additional metrics later, but a third of the time, traditional performance management processes and tools actually make performance worse, not better, which is shocking, but probably not surprising. And then employee motivation. Companies with highly engaged employees increase profits by 23% and outperform their competitors financially by 147%. So when you're talking about engaging and aligning your workforce, you're not talking about these feel-good measures. Oftentimes that's kind of how they emerge. We want to engage our workforce. We want them to be happy, but it goes well beyond being happy. It goes to the source of what has people actually feel like they are a part of something bigger than themselves. And so that's what we need to tap into in order to deliver outsized impact at the individual and team level that then translates into significant impact for the business. So it's a bottom line issue that we need to address here, not just a feel good issue. And here's a quote that really stuck out for me from some research that we did in collaboration with Lighthouse Research last year. Managers that said that their companies offered technology that supported their performance on the job were 37% more likely to understand their own job expectations and responsibilities. And imagine the impact that that has on their team members, because managers are truly the conduit of communication and expectation setting to employees on behalf of their business. So we can't underestimate or underinvest in the impact of managers in the workplace. So I'll say something probably not so profound to this group. Performance reviews suck. If you disagree, share that with me. But the reality is all of the data that we have and that we've been surfacing for decades indicates that our traditional or legacy performance processes are highly ineffective. 98% of CHROs don't believe performance management actually works. I'm in a what the heck moment when I read that statistic, and it shocks me every time I see it. And I've seen it dozens of times at this point. 95% of managers are dissatisfied with these traditional processes, and less than 1 in 5 employees agree that their performance reviews inspire them to improve. Again, what the heck? And again, the statistic that I shared earlier, a third of the time, traditional performance reviews and approaches to feedback are so bad that they actually make performance worse. It's crazy. It is crazy that we're facing this. Something that I learned when we were evaluating, like, how do we solve this problem, is that the traditional performance review that we're familiar with, the rating system, it actually, the origin can be traced back to World War I. That was the 19 teens. That was a very long time ago. over 100 years ago. And it was actually the source or the origin of the current state of performance reviews came from the Army in battlefields determining whether they should retain or transfer or let soldiers out of the Army. So they weren't even used in the context of the traditional workplace, much less the modern workplace. In 2025, it is amazing that we're using a practice that started in the 19 teens in a battlefield setting. And I would argue that we're spending way too much time compiling performance reviews. The estimates are well over 40 hours for managers on this process. That's over a week's time. Some estimates are even higher. And if we're spending that much time on a process that is not actually working, then we're absolutely losing the opportunity to deliver the most compelling approach to bringing out the best in our people. So we have a tremendous opportunity. So our next question to get you all involved is, on average, how much time do your managers spend on the entire performance review cycle? So think in terms of the individual performance reviews, the calibration sessions, the actual, not only preparing the reviews, but delivering it, doing the follow-up. All right. See a lot of C's and D's, couple of A's and B's. So I don't know, but probably not the right amount of time, or over 20 hours per cycle. Even if it's 10 hours per cycle, if it's not working, it's 10 hours that were not invested well. So we have an opportunity with our managers and with our teams to do better. Now, I think it's important to recognize that performance reviews exist for a reason. So we'll talk about why we have them in place and then how we migrate from where we've been to where we're going. But I would argue it's time for a profound paradigm shift in moving from a backward-looking process to a practice or a ritual that is ongoing, something that intervenes at the time when it's appropriate to reinforce good behavior or to help someone adjust their behavior or input so that they hit the right outcome. Moving from subjective assessments that are riddled with recency bias based on the timing that we typically engage in, to a data-driven, more holistic approach to the conversation. One that is largely driven by compensation requirements or decisions, to one that is focused on growth. Doesn't mean that you take compensation out of consideration, but you need to actually use your performance process to help people achieve what's possible and achieve the best version of their selves. So achieve their full potential. Rather than being a truly top-down driven process, you can actually turn it into more of a 360 holistic view on someone's full breadth and depth of work. And then rather than it being anxiety inducing, which, by the way, that anxiety is very much driven by the fact that we do this once or twice a year, and it's always this big question as to how it's going to go, to one that is positive and constructive, particularly when it's a practice or a ritual versus a one-time or a two-time-a-year event. You have much more opportunity to have a more robust conversation with lower anxiety. And then when moving from something that's a super costly distraction from day-to-day work to one that's truly embedded into the flow of work, it's simple, it's light lift, it's something that's just naturally occurring in the ongoing interactions between a manager and their team. So I said a lot there. That's just to paint the picture of where we're coming from and where we can go. Just to answer Jem's question, I'm not suggesting that you do 360 assessments in place of performance reviews, but a 360 or holistic view on someone's performance compared to what a manager typically sees is truly critical to seeing the whole impact, the whole body of work, and true depth and breadth of somebody's capabilities so that you can provide them the feedback that helps them bring out their best. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we start talking about the practical steps to getting to the right place. But I mentioned earlier, we conduct performance reviews for a reason, and there are very valid reasons. And for the HR practitioners in every workplace across the company, you have an accountability for delivering on a few things related to the performance review process. One, it's a way that you demonstrate to company executives how people are performing, how they are achieving company outcomes, and really executives are looking at this as an indication of the return on their investment in people, which is the largest investment that they make. So this is a super important process from the perspective of understanding how we're tapping into the collective capabilities of the people on our team. It's also important to confirm where employees stand on performance and the accomplishment of their goals. That conversation between the manager and the employee are really critical to ensure alignment in the assessment of what has happened and how it happened. It's also a critical opportunity to provide feedback on capabilities, skills, and areas of growth. But when it's only happening once or twice a year, you truly miss out on the opportunity to tap into those capabilities and really propel them in the right direction for the benefit of the company and the individual. It's also an opportunity to celebrate success. When you meet or exceed expectations, when you deliver on something compelling, it's an opportunity to pause and say, wow, that was awesome. And people need that. They need that confirmation, not just the coaching. Reinforcing the behaviors that matter, including living out the company values. Almost every performance review format that we've seen has some sort of assessment to the company values and how people are performing against those company values. Michelle, I see you moved to quarterly with annual wrap-ups. I would love to chat with you after the webinar on how you migrated to that more frequent basis and how that's working for you all. Coming back to why we're doing performance reviews, justifying employment actions, promotions, raises, bonuses, or lack thereof. You need some sort of documentation that lays out the case for whatever action you're wanting to take. So I'm not going to argue that there's not a valid reason to collect this type of information and engage in this type of process with employees. I'm just saying we're approaching it from the wrong perspective in having it be an event once or twice a year rather than an ongoing dialogue. And that is truly possible today. All right. So when we empower our managers and intentionally incorporate modern practices, or what I like to refer to as rituals, the entire team can reach their full potential. And it's not as hard as it may seem on the surface. And I started my career in HR over 30 years ago, sitting in-house. For the first decade of my career, I sat in-house in enterprise HR departments, really large companies. They were slow to move. We were talking at that time about the performance review process, which, by the way, we did on paper. And we had these big file rooms where we captured all of the paper associated with employees. Crazy, crazy times back in the early 90s. So we really, we've been talking for decades about changing this process. It doesn't mean that there are aspects of it that have to go away, but we need to deliver it in a way that actually has the impact that we intend to. So let's just ground on some guiding principles, and then I'm going to jump right into how do we go from where we are today in this backward-looking process to incorporating the right practices and rituals with our managers and their teams to make the performance review a non-event. So guiding principles. People working on teams are the primary drivers of business success. That's a founding belief of Bonusly, why we started. But I also, from working with HR practitioners for the last 30 years and spending a lot of time with people trying to solve for building a better workplace, believe that most people in this field in HR believe the same thing, that people working on teams are what drive business success, particularly today in our environment, the knowledge economy. And so if we have that as our grounding or guiding philosophy, then we need to think about how do we position our organizations to create a better workplace and better processes that bring out the best in people across all levels and all teams and all types of roles. So we have a framework at Bonusly for the way that we think about this. We're very much known for our recognition platforms, but we also have performance built in. And you have to look across the three critical relationships in the workplace, and you have to nurture each one of those in order for this process to work. And this starts with the purpose or the foundation of why the company exists. So you have to start with your strong mission, vision, and values as a company. So that's your foundation that you're beginning from. And then you have to really cultivate that relationship between the company and the employee. You need to celebrate your employees not only for what they do and how they perform, but also who they are as individuals and really recognize them as humans. Part of the lack of trust in the workplace is that many companies have moved right past that building of the relationship between the company and the employee and recognizing them for more than just the work that they do, to give them the sense that they are cared about as individuals as much as they are cared about as employees. And so your opportunity here is to reinforce the values when you see people living the values, to celebrate their personal milestones. That's truly critical. We talk about, and we've talked about for years, wanting people to bring their whole selves to work. Well, goodness, then we should celebrate their whole lives, not just the things that they do between 9 and 5 or whatever the work schedule is. We absolutely have to acknowledge who they are and celebrate that alongside what they do for the company. The next lever here, the next critical relationship, is building that relationship between employees. Coming back to people working on teams are the primary drivers of business success. It's the connection between those individuals that really makes the difference in performance, in them working together, in them feeling a part of something alongside their peers. Now, they want to feel a part of something bigger than themselves, and that's where your mission, vision, and values come in. But who better to acknowledge the great work that people are doing in the workplace than the people that they're working with? Managers see a small sliver, leaders see a small sliver of the work that's being done day to day. When you unlock your employees' ability to openly acknowledge and celebrate the impact of the people that they work with, either how they showed up in demonstrating the values or how they overcame challenges to achieve an objective, then you really start to build the culture into the fabric of the organization, and you move values off of, posters on walls and into the hearts and souls of the people who are showing up day in and day out. So really ensuring that you're not only looking at it from the company to employee perspective, but you're also putting the power in the hands of the employees to recognize each other, to share what they're seeing day in and day out. And it creates this virtuous cycle of reinforcing the behaviors that matter to drive performance and reinforcing the values being lived out that drive the culture in the organization. So that's the second relationship that I was referring to. The third relationship is that between managers and their teams. So when the company is really highlighting the work that matters and celebrating employees and building that relationship with employees, they're unlocking employees' ability to do that with each other, then managers have the ability to see more of the impact, the full scope of work, all of the strengths that an employee has, as well as where they may be focused in areas that don't serve them well or that need to be redirected so that they can meet their own objectives or the team can meet the objectives. So it gives the managers a much broader perspective of the employee's full capabilities, their full body of work, their full contributions, as well as the areas for development. And so when I talk about that 360 view, like I was mentioning earlier, and somebody questioned, are you talking about doing like a traditional 360 survey? That's not what I'm referring to. What I'm referring to is this, where a manager has the full visibility. Leaders have full visibility into the complete body of work of employees. And in order to accomplish this, you have to have a transparent organization where you've encouraged your employees to share out loud publicly in very compelling, clear communication what people are doing. This is not your attaboy or attagirl. This is Susie helped me learn how to do this, and the impact that it had was that. And so those become the stories that tell how values are lived, but also how people are accomplishing and completing great work, and what's important in the business. And so that empowers your managers to see what's going on in the natural flow of everyday work so that they can coach and provide feedback and support someone's growth in the moment, not once a year. So it's an ongoing coaching exercise. Your managers have to become coaches in this process. And then only when you've unlocked those three relationships, you've created that transparency grounded on company values and mission, can you achieve a sustainable level of high performance. And it's sustainable because it's not top down. It's by the people, for the people, but it's grounded in what the company is trying to accomplish. And so this is really the recipe for pulling it all together across all aspects of the relationships in the workplace. Now, I know that you're interested in how you get from performance reviews suck to how do I unleash and unlock the full potential of my teams. So let's move into the conversation around performance that actually works. And so I'll ask you to just be open-minded about how you can incorporate some of these key workflows into the way that you're already working. Instead of doing it once a year, let's look at how we can incorporate it into our natural flow of working with teams and their managers and their teams. So performance that actually works is a ritual, not an event. It's an ongoing process. When you look at all the, I hate to use sports analogies because I'm so bad at sports. But if you look at somebody who is at bat in a baseball game, and they strike out and they walk over to the dugout, the coach immediately provides them feedback so that when they go up to bat again, they have a better shot at making contact with the ball or not getting struck out. And so you have to look at it from the perspective of those micro moments where you can give people pointers on the few things that they could change or the one thing that they could change that would have impact on their performance or their deliverables. And so you have to look at it like it's a ritual, like it's an ongoing conversation and not a one-time event. So let's pause and ground in really, how do you ritualize the common elements of performance reviews? And in studying all different formats of conducting for performance reviews, they are all laid out differently, but they have some common elements. And I would argue that we missed the mark by incorporating these elements into a one-time a year or twice a year event. And so the 5 areas or elements that we saw consistently across all performance reviews that we studied, there was an assessment of goals, both business and personal goals. There was feedback provided, often in both directions, sometimes with a 360 component coming from other areas within the business. There was recognition and celebration provided, honoring people's successes, highlighting progress, highlighting their impact. There was some element of measuring the value, measuring the living of the values. So how, not only what are they accomplishing, but how are they accomplishing that? Aligning to company values. Are we working the way that we intend to be working based on what the company says is important to them? And then there's an element of conversation where there's dialogue. It's not one directional. It's an engagement between the two individuals. And trust building is really critical to that process. So let's take a minute And we'll break down each one of these and talk about how to incorporate them into the day-to-day with managers instead of having them be an event at periodic points during the year, actually engaging in these conversations in a regular cadence, on a regular cycle, not as a review process, but as a progression in the employee's development and growth and impact in the business. So, excuse me, I'm about to sneeze, so give me just a second to take a drink and hopefully I can get this behind me. Okay. So from a goals perspective, we have historically separated company goals from personal development goals. And there's a concept of an individual development plan, but it happens over here, aside from the company goal setting process. Often run on different cycles, one may be more formal than the other. Typically, the company goals are very formal, top down. But what's missing is the bottom up connection from an employee's current capabilities and their ambitions around what they want to accomplish in their current role or where they want to grow into. And so bringing these two together actually gives you greater opportunity to develop the employee along the path of delivering against company goals, even when they're looking to do something outside of their current role. So we're going to get interactive again. And I want to ask and have you answer in the chat, how often do your managers and their teams discuss individual and team goals? A, weekly, B, monthly, C, I have no idea. We don't have any way to measure this. Okay, so we're all over the board. I saw 2 times a year. Okay, quarterly, yearly. All right, lots of engagement here. I'm going to ask, I'm going unscripted. So this is something you should know about me. It makes everybody in my company nervous when I get on a call like this. Unscripted here. I have another question for you. How many of you are concerned about what goes on in these conversations between managers and employees? Do you have confidence? Very concerned, no concern, concerned, confident, depends. Okay. So what I'm taking away from this is that even in the case where you have confidence, you don't necessarily have the visibility to know exactly how those conversations are going or how effectively those are going. So that's an area of opportunity to support our HR practitioners in bringing that visibility, it sounds like. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Thank you for that. And thanks for entertaining an off-scripted question. You all did great. You helped me out. So in transitioning from a backward-looking process to really incorporating a ritual around goals, what we believe and what we recommend is that you look at this in a couple of different vantage points. One, part of the regular one-on-one with managers and their teams should be revisiting the company, department, and individual goals, however that lines up for your particular organization. Depending on the team or the role, there may not be a big company level goal that you're talking about on a regular basis, but there may be incremental individual or team goals that ladder up. Those are the conversations that need to be had, not once a quarter, once every 6 months, once a year. Those should actually be talked about on a regular basis between team meetings and in the individual one-on-ones. In the one-on-ones, incorporating as well what you're working on with that individual to develop them. So combining individual development planning with the goal tracking and goal feedback on department and individual goals is really critical to having more impact with the individual and tying the work that they're doing and the stretching that they're doing to actual business impact. So by having those conversations together rather than having them be separate processes, you actually create more connectivity and you provide the feedback in the moment when somebody needs it, when they can actually have impact on the outcomes. providing a look back on whether you hit or missed a goal. It's important reflection, but that's not the time that somebody can do something about it. The opportunity is in the moment, in the day-to-day, in the weekly one-on-one, in the team meeting, in an impromptu conversation to incorporate that. So really, I know most companies won't move off of a traditional top-down goal-setting process, but empowering your managers to take that into the individual level and to have frequent conversations around the work that is happening to align to those, and incorporating that development goal-setting process into the same process is really critical to saving time and becoming more effective in driving a high-performing outcome. All right, the second key area from a performance review perspective is that they all incorporate some sort of feedback. And the impact of feedback when you get it once a year can be overwhelming. When you have feedback on a regular basis and it's pointed to a specific moment in time or situation, the employee has the ability to act on that feedback in a way that delivers a different outcome. And because it's delivered incrementally, the feedback is offered as it's needed and as it's appropriate. It doesn't feel like that massive boulder landing on top of you once a year in a big high stress performance review process. And so it's really a building up of capabilities through that incremental coaching that's happening along the way. We call it feedback, but in the best scenarios, every employee across the company is empowered to be a coach because we all bring different strengths regardless of our role or responsibility for others. And when you create an environment where teams have strong relationships and they all have the sense of we're going to win together, they truly come together in a way that help each other perform better. And they're providing these micro moments of coaching that allow us to incorporate or consume that coaching in a way that we can action it, not be overwhelmed by it. And so I want to take another moment to gather your feedback. It's overwhelming how active you all are. It's been a bit since I've been in an HRCI webinar, and I just love the activity. So how important do you believe creating a feedback culture is in achieving sustainable high performance? Extremely important. Okay, I see a lot of varies and extremely important. Yeah. How much pressure do you think it is for a manager to be the sole person responsible for providing that feedback? It's a lot of pressure for managers. And when you combine that pressure with the fact that in many organizations, managers don't see the full body of work or only really see a small portion of what somebody's working on, they're operating basically with one hand tied behind their back. We really impair their ability to have impact as a manager. So a feedback culture where you can mobilize every single person in the organization to become a coach and support each other actually means that individual employees benefit. Now, managers benefit from having a bit of pressure taken off, but the employees are the ones who benefit. And those are the people doing the day-to-day work. And so if we empower our team members to do this, we're in a much better situation. I apologize, I have a little Slack notification. Apparently Slack made another update and now I'm hoping, okay, didn't mess up my sharing. I always get worried about that. All right, so in order to turn managers and teammates into coaches, you need to do a few things. Earlier, I mentioned you need to really empower your employees to catch people at their best. You want managers to do that, and managers are expected to do that. But when you empower employees to do that, and they share these examples explicitly, telling robust stories about what they see their team members doing, and do that in a way that is transparent to the whole company, then managers are more empowered with a complete picture and can see where the opportunities lie. But you also create this environment where we pull our employees into a situation where they're in it together. And there's a sense of teamship that really calls upon the individuals to help each other succeed. And so you democratize the coaching alongside democratizing the recognition. Feedback, recognition is a form of feedback. So when you ground and you start in creating a culture of appreciation with robust recognition being given, you begin to build the bonds between team members that then unlocks that trust and ability to share constructive feedback as well. And with a complete picture of what's going on and ongoing nudges. And you can do this from you can do it from a technology perspective. We do that. But from a people leadership perspective, if you incorporate into your practices with your managers, your reminders with your managers, that they're not only recognizing great work and outcomes, but they're stepping back and taking a moment on a regular basis to identify an area that they can provide coaching and feedback to someone that will help them pivot, adjust, make the changes needed to help them realize greater outcomes, improve their performance. Just continuously remind managers to be on the lookout for this. And they incorporate that into, in the right ways, into team meetings, in team coaching, but also in individual one-on-ones. That becomes really powerful when delivered in the right way. And so you unlock that feedback culture that helps to drive high performance. All right, recognition. I love this visual, and I've been describing it in this way for quite some time. And I experienced this myself as a manager. I see a small sliver of what the team is doing. I'm either copied on an email or I'm in a meeting with a customer or a prospect, and I see firsthand. But I see that once. Our team members are in cross-functional teams, are working together on accounts, they're working together on projects. Their team members see them much more frequently than their managers do. And so the importance of unlocking that peer-to-peer recognition and making that public and making that very explicit is that you get a full and complete picture of somebody's capabilities, where they're having impact, where they're spending their time, not from a micromanagement perspective, but from the perspective of ensuring that their investment of time and energy is aligned to what is going to drive the outcomes of the business. Because the worst thing that we can do is let somebody keep going down a path that isn't going to help them achieve their own objectives, help them grow in the way that they've stated that they want to grow, or help us achieve our company objectives. And so it's really critical to ensure that your managers have full visibility. And so again, coming back to that 360 view, you want to have a complete picture, and you can't do that on your own. And we should take the pressure off of managers having the expectation that they see and witness everything. We need to empower them in ways that allow them to gather these insights much easier and much more transparently. So the recognition component is really critical because it's the foundational aspect of feedback that builds that trust and that rounds out that sense of, okay, I'm a complete person. I am not just a collection of all the things that I have missed in my career or in my work. I have also delivered positively. So it's both sides of that feedback coin. So the positive feedback actually sets the foundation for understanding and trust and helps people feel seen for their whole contributions, not just the areas that they need to improve, which is really critical. Creating a culture where you're celebrating those successes. So even when you have a robust peer-to-peer recognition process or platform, going further and actually celebrating those successes is really powerful for the employee. So we do this at the company and at the manager or team level as a practice. So we may flag recognition that people have been provided at the company level at an all hands because it's worth reinforcing, or you want to call out a specific example. But we also do it in the team and one-on-one setting. So celebrating the wins that the team has accomplished. In fact, my team today at Bonusly is going through their 2024 look back, and we pulled all of the recognition that was received, and we're incorporating that into a really nice discussion with the team to really ground in everything that this team brings from a strengths perspective and a success perspective. We often don't celebrate the way that we should, but let me tell you how powerful it is to bring this into a one-on-one. When you see that someone has been given recognition that you weren't a part of, you weren't in the meeting or in the scenario that led to that recognition, and you can actually refer back to it in a one-on-one with the employee when it's recent, it's really powerful. And so this becomes really grounding in the perspective of keeping the feedback balanced. I know we're almost at time, Megan, so I will be quick in the next two, I promise. All right, values. How many of you have values in your onboarding sessions, either in slides or you have them posted on walls? Yeah. So that's absolutely, they look perfect in, in a frame. But the reality is when core values are being lived in real life, it often isn't like this perfect, picture perfect example. And so it may be a winding road to demonstrating the values. And so by reinforcing the behaviors that drive business outcomes and the how people got there, you reinforce what that value truly means to the organization. You make it easier for people to understand the expectations. And so this becomes really critical in ensuring that people are actually able to personalize and operationalize the values, not just reread them or memorize them. And then finally, from a conversation perspective, what it feels like when you have a performance conversation with your manager once a year is that there's this huge disconnect between your manager and yourself. There's a lot of anxiety walking into it. But if you have an ongoing relationship with your manager and you're having these conversations on an ongoing basis, you walk into the year end and there are no surprises because you've already talked about everything. It really ends up just being a recap. And so what we have to do is ensure that we're having the right conversations with people on an ongoing basis. I'm an advocate of weekly one-on-one meetings for most roles across most organizations. I know people do it on other cycles, but you miss things the longer you go. Things move quickly. So having ongoing conversations around how the work gets done and how people are progressing along their growth goals is truly critical to ensuring that there are no surprises. You should leave nothing unsaid and waiting for some milestone in the future. So when using a proper check-in and coaching along the way, performance is enabled in the flow of work and reviews are just recaps. All right, so for the sake of time, Megan, I know that we're almost at time. I will skip to just the final closeout here before we get to Q&A. Cultivating high-performing teams is hard, but it's not impossible with Bonusly. And so we are going to launch a poll here. If you'd like to learn more about Bonusly in particular and speak with an engagement and recognition expert, please just respond to the poll. Otherwise, please do bring any questions you have to the Q&A panel. Bonusly is the platform that goes beyond recognition to build the relationships that matter in the workplace and to unlock your team's full potential. Over to you, Megan.
Thank you
Sorry, I get so passionate about this.
I know it's fantastic though, and much appreciated. The feedback from the audience was excellent. So thank you so much for your insight today. And we do have some questions I want to make sure that we have a chance to put in front of you and get your expertise. So given you have over 25 years of leadership in HR, especially, how would you keep a current staff engaged while everyone is afraid their position is easily replaced? That was the first question out of the gate, and it's a great one.
Yeah, it's a tough one too. Yeah, that's the reality of the market that we live in too, as much as it is, individual circumstances. So first off, I learned the hard way early in my career. You can't tell somebody that there is no risk in the workplace overall because we don't know that. We can't commit to that. What we can do is share what we do know and creating an environment of transparency and sharing what you can. So number one, like how are we performing against the objectives, but also what is it that we're focused on? how can people help? How can people help make our numbers? And if you're not in the go-to-market or commercial organization, how do you help us keep costs under control? How do you provide feedback that will help us make better decisions as an organization? And how do we as leaders help people make better decisions on behalf of the organization? Because it's the small incremental decisions that get made that can add up. So we have to provide transparency. We may not be able to show all the numbers. Different companies have different philosophies with regard to that, and public companies have limitations as well on timing. But we can be clear as to what is going on and what is important, and ensure that we handle those conversations with care without promising that there is no risk, really empowering people to have the best impact on the organization.
Very good. Excellent. So regarding performance reviews, I loved all your feedback on that. And I love that image of the rock with the multiple rocks, comparing the two. As far as performance reviews that are lightly tied to compensation reviews, how might that discussion influence salary increases for top performers? Does that impact it at all, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, generally your performance does have some impact on compensation, but it does really starts with the total rewards philosophy at the company. And your performance is not the only factor impacting your compensation as well. So there's series of the company maturity, company's compensation philosophy, where you're at in the range also has impact. A high performer who's top of range may not get an increase or may not get as much increase because the next opportunity is at the next level, not in growing in comp at the current level. So you have to take a number of factors into consideration. One thing is for sure, though, for people who are not performing according to expectations, their raises either don't come at all or they're not as large. So helping people understand the compensation philosophy and how you make those decisions is truly critical. They need to understand that there are limits to the amount that can be earned per role, if that's the company's philosophy, and how they can get to the next level if they're compensation driven in that regard.
Excellent. And then how do you apply the same performance reviews in a workforce where the roles range from manager to production to technicians?
Yeah. Well, there are certain elements that will carry over regardless of role. Whatever goals were set for the individual and how they contributed to that, and then how did they accomplish specific, like how did they align to the values? Were they living the values or specific role-related competencies? I think the variation is in those role-related competencies and expectations. So for example, at a manager level, you're not only accountable for your own performance, you are accountable for the results of the team that you manage as well. So it's a very different scenario. So some of the sections may be the same across all roles, like those, did you meet your objectives and did you live the values? But the expectations within each may vary depending on level or function.
And then this next question, really important one as well. Do you see any pushback from senior leadership when transitioning to a feedback culture? And if so, how did you overcome that pushback?
Yeah, so that you have to have buy-in on a feedback culture from the leadership, and you need them to actually engage in really being a part of that culture from the beginning, like to demonstrate those same skills and behaviors that you're expecting from others. One, I think, what I've seen work is tying the feedback culture impact on company outcomes and demonstrating that we can get to the right results faster if we remove the barriers and the friction in the process, which requires that we call on everyone to speak up and to share feedback with each other, regardless of role. And so really grounding in the ROI at the leadership level goes a long way. It's going to be difficult if all of your leaders don't buy into that. And usually it's grounded in fear. So as an HR practitioner, overcoming the challenge is less about proving the ROI and more about uncovering where the fear comes from and helping them navigate that fear. How can we support them in demonstrating these skills? and in demonstrating the behaviors that we're asking everyone to engage in.
Very good. Well, I hate to say this, Deborah, but we are out of time and want to make sure that we have a chance to share that recertification code. Today's activity ID is 695130. Again, 695130, and this has been approved for 1 HR credit towards your recertification. We thank all of our attendees who joined us today, especially those of you who were very engaging in the chat. Your answers do matter, and we appreciate the feedback. And Deborah, thank you so much to you and our colleagues at Bonusly for coming back. We're so happy to have you join us, and thanks for the great presentation. And then also, Cheryl Jensen, if you know her, or if you could please reach out, because they have Bonusly and need some ideas on how to encourage and educate employees to use it and increase their activity as well.
Absolutely. That's exciting.
Great. Well, thank you so much for this great presentation, and thank you all again for joining us today. We hope to see you at our next webinar coming up soon. Have a great day.
Thank you.